Thank you. That concludes general questions. The next item of business is First Minister's questions. At question number 1, I call Russell Finlay.
Thank you, President Officer. John Swinney yesterday launched yet another taxpayer-funded paper on independence, and he's called it a fresh start.
Let's hear Mr Finlay. Let's hear Mr Finlay.
They won't be clapping in a minute. The same John Swinney has dreamed about breaking up the United Kingdom for almost 50 years. He was at the forefront of the Free by 93 campaign. He first became leader of the SNP at the turn of the millennium. In 2014, he played a crucial role in the losing Yes campaign. Thank you, John. And last year, he became SNP leader again. And he really thinks it's plausible to describe his latest independence paper as a fresh start. Is John Swinney having a laugh?
Full names at all times, please. First Minister.
President Officer, before I respond to Mr Finlay, I want to take a moment to welcome the news that Israel and Hamas have agreed the first phase of a peace plan for Gaza. I call on all sides to abide by the terms of the agreement, the release of all hostages and the immediate entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. After more than 2 years of devastating brutality and loss of life, I know that this will be a moment of relief for many here in Scotland and around the world. I reiterate my call that Palestinians and Israelis must be able to live safely, side by side, based on a two-state solution, and I dearly hope this is the first step towards that outcome. And I express my thanks to all of the mediators who have worked so hard to create this moment and this opportunity for peace. In relation to Mr Finlay's substantive question, I am deadly serious about the arguments for Scottish independence. As a country, we have exercised self-government since 1999 with the establishment of this Parliament, and a number of significant benefits have been achieved for the people of Scotland, some delivered by the previous government, such as the ban on smoking in public places or the introduction of free personal care. Some of them delivered by my government, whether that's about the abolition of tuition fees or minimum unit pricing of alcohol or the introduction of the Scottish Child Payment. But we are at a moment now in Scotland where the rightward drift of the United Kingdom and the stagnation of living standards in our country demonstrate a re-examine of this argument, and that's why independence is the fresh start that Scotland needs.
Russell Finlay.
I think the fact he says he's deadly serious is actually even more worrying than if he was just having a laugh. John Swinney can't offer a fresh start because he's been in the SNP government for almost 20 years. He was Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond's right-hand man, up to his neck in every SNP scandal: ferries, gender self-ID, SQA exams, named persons and many more. He ran down Scotland's economy, and then he ran down Scotland's education system.
Correct.
And a new survey shows that public trust in the Scottish Government is at an all-time low. And this was a Scottish Government survey. So does John Swinney accept that this is a damning judgment on his dismal record?
First Minister.
What my government is focused on is improving the lives of people in Scotland. That's why we are keeping prescriptions free in Scotland, while they're nearly £10 under Labour in England. It's why we're protecting free tuition in Scotland, while they're rising south of the border. It's why we've expanded early learning and childcare. It's why we've extended free school meals. It's why we've introduced the Scottish Child Payment. It's why we abolished peak rail fares on our railways for good, because we are interested in providing practical support to improve the lives of people in Scotland, and we will continue to do so. I noticed in the survey that Mr Finlay is talking about that there's also a question on independence. It indicates that support for independence is at 47%, up from 27% in 1999. I can see the direction of travel in Scotland, and it's going to independence.
Russell Finlay.
Nicola Sturgeon's book should be in the fiction section, but John Swinney's paper really should be in the fantasy section. And it's not just harmless fantasy, Presiding Officer, but actually dangerous dishonesty. Because this graph here says that Scotland's GDP has grown faster than the rest of the UK, when the opposite is true. Serious and credible experts have demolished this 90-page exercise in wishful thinking. Leading economist Professor Ronald MacDonald said John Swinney's plans are, I quote, totally shambolic and would have a, again quoting, devastating effect.
That's the reality.
He expressed astonishment at the quote, again quote, total ignorance of the SNP's currency position. Damningly, he said all of this will impact on public sector wages, pensions, mortgages, borrowing costs for homes and
Let's hear
businesses.
Mr Finlay.
This is a paper with no solutions. It does nothing to help people's lives here and now. It's an outrage that it was produced by Scottish civil servants. So will John Swinney stop wasting any more taxpayers' money on such nonsense?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, under the SNP government, GDP per person in Scotland has grown by 10.3% compared to 6.1% in the UK, while productivity has grown at an average rate of 1.1% per year in Scotland compared to the UK average of 0.4%. So that demonstrates that the point that Mr Finlay has put to Parliament is
hear the First Minister.
Is not correct. Now, the issue that Mr Finlay has got to address is that the arguments that he puts forward to preserve the status quo are now completely and utterly threadbare. Labour and Tory politicians said that staying in the United Kingdom would lower our bills, but the opposite has been the case. They promised financial security, but gave us the Liz Truss mini-budget. They assured us that voting no was the surest way for Scotland to remain in the European Union, but Scotland has been taken out against our will. The arguments against Scottish independence have collapsed since 2014, and Scotland is on a pathway to independence.
Russell Finlay.
John Swinney's graph on GDP is wrong, just like his stats last week on income tax were wrong. And if he ever got his way, it would mean extreme tax rises and severe spending cuts for Scotland. Mortgages up, pensions at risk and a hard border with England. Scotland would be divided, smaller and weaker. And despite all of this, John Swinney keeps obsessing about independence, which would make Scots poorer. No wonder public trust in the SNP is at an all-time low. John Swinney is not a fresh start. This man is not a fresh start. He's a tired nationalist with a dismal record. He's not focused on building a strong economy for the future. He's wasting time and taxpayers' money on the same old arguments of the past. So, for the sake of Scotland, is he ever going to give up on his independence obsession and move on?
First Minister.
I think it's pretty clear, I think, to any member of the public watching this exchange, that the more Russell Finlay gets personally insulting to his political rivals, the weaker his arguments become. Because what I've marshalled in front of Parliament today is the evidence. Living standards are stagnating in Scotland, and they have stagnated for 15 years.
First Minister, sorry, it's becoming increasingly difficult to hear one another. If members haven't been called to speak, please resist the temptation to do so. Those gathered in the gallery, I am sure, would wish to hear contributions. First Minister.
Presiding Officer, living standards in Scotland as part of the United Kingdom have ground to a halt. Brexit has been a disaster. The implications of the Liz Truss mini-budget have wreaked economic difficulty and havoc on the people of the United Kingdom, and Scotland has been saddled with that despite the promises of lower prices, lower bills and access to the European Union from the No campaign in 2014. I am very proud to lead a campaign which is about focusing on improving living standards in Scotland, transforming the lives of people in Scotland, and will do that through independence.
Question number 2, Anna Sarwar.
Can I firstly welcome the agreement on a Gaza ceasefire, the end of the bloodshed and the release of hostages. This must be real and it needs to last, but it must be backed up by an urgent surge in aid into Gaza and a meaningful pathway to an end of the illegal occupation and a lasting peace where every life, Palestinian or Israeli, is treated as equal. Today we will vote on the Right to Recovery Bill and we will support it at stage 1. 6 years ago, the SNP declared a drugs deaths emergency. And 6 years on, lives are still being lost, families are still grieving, and a generation has been failed. In just the first 6 months of this year, 607 people died from suspected drug overdoses. 1 life lost every 7 hours. And when it comes to recovery, the picture is just as bleak. The SNP haven't delivered the promised rehabilitation beds. But even more shamefully, 77% of areas report being unable to access rehab spaces because they don't have the money they need from the SNP government. Rehab beds lying empty in the middle of a drugs deaths emergency. So can I ask John Swinney, why 6 years into this emergency are beds being left empty and Scots not getting the treatment they need to recover?
First Minister.
President, I recognise the importance of the issues in relation to drugs support for individuals and the necessity of us delivering on the commitments that we have made as part of the programme. In relation to the specific issue that Mr Sarwar raises with me, we set out a commitment to establish 1,000 publicly funded placements per year by 25-26, and the most recent Public Health Scotland publication shows that there were 984 confirmed records of individuals starting a publicly funded residential rehab placement in 2022-23. Now, we've made £38 million available between 8 projects across Scotland to provide additional residential rehabilitation beds. And the latest published figures report a rise in capacity of 88 beds to a total of 513 in September 2024. And there has been further expansion since then. So what I assure Mr Sarwar about is, first of all, the importance of this endeavour, and secondly, the practical steps being taken to implement the commitments that we have given, and we will continue to do so.
Anna Sarwar.
The promises have not been met, and the families left behind deserve justice, not excuses. Shamefully, new figures show that 573 charges for drug dealing had to be dropped in the last 3 years because the cases were time-barred before reaching court. Hundreds of those accused of drug dealing simply walking free, evading justice, not because they were found innocent, but because of this government's incompetence. People selling poison to their communities given the green light to destroy lives because John Swinney and his tired government can't run a court system that sends drug dealers to prison. 573 drug-dealing charges simply dropped. So can John Swinney understand why people will be so angry when they learn that despite 1 life being lost to drugs every 7 hours in Scotland, hundreds of drug dealers are walking free?
First Minister.
President Officer, the issues in relation to the court service are essentially an implication of the period during COVID in which we had a backlog of cases that had to be addressed. And the court service worked incredibly hard and works incredibly hard to erode those backlogs that we are wrestling with. And significant work has been undertaken because if I then look at other data, our prisons, as the Justice Secretary reported to Parliament last Thursday, our prisons are incredibly congested and in many cases by individuals who have been convicted and sentenced for a long period of time as a consequence of their drug-related activities. And we are wrestling within our prison system, admirably by the Scottish Prison Service, with the congestion of many groups that are involved in organised crime, which is underpinning the drugs issue. So I know that the Crown and the Scottish Courts and Tribunal Service are working incredibly hard in an incredibly focused way to make sure that the perpetrators of illegal drug activity in our society are brought to justice, and many of them are.
Anna Sarwar.
Presiding Officer, there is no justification for hundreds of drug dealers walking free because of the incompetence of this SNP government. No justification at all, because this is a government that has lost control. 607 lives lost in just 6 months, 1 every 7 hours, and 573 drug supply charges unpunished, and still not enough access to treatment or residential rehab for those who want to recover. The truth is, John Swinney's approach is failing both victims and communities. Dealers slipping through the cracks, people dying waiting for help, and families losing loved ones and left without hope. 6 years ago, 6 years since they declared an emergency, and still Scotland leads Europe in drugs deaths. John Swinney has abandoned both justice and recovery. So isn't it the case that we will never get to grips with Scotland's drugs death emergency while he and the SNP stay in charge?
First Minister.
President Officer, the Government has taken a focused approach to addressing the drugs issue in our society over a number of years, and a number of significant steps have been taken to address those questions. First of all, I've put on the record the issues around about the expansion of rehabilitation placements, and that progress is being achieved as we committed to doing so. We supported the delivery of the first of the safe consumption rooms, which we know, based on the evidence that is available to us, has saved lives as a consequence of the intervention of the Thistle. We've expanded the rollout of naloxone, which is resulting in significant avoidance of death and injury to individuals who are using drugs. And in addition to that, we are seeing, and I recognise that the levels of drug deaths are far too high, but we are seeing a decrease in the last year of 13% in drugs deaths in Scotland, although we must maintain absolute vigilance and focus to make sure that we continue to make that progress. And finally, on the issue of the criminal justice system, our prison system is absolutely full of individuals, many of whom have been imprisoned because of their drug-related activity. So it is quite simply wrong for Mr Sarwar to suggest that people are not being brought to justice because of their criminal activity, and that will remain the focused priority of the Scottish Government.
Question number 3, Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Can I associate myself entirely with the First Minister's remarks about progress towards peace in the Middle East? Can I also take a moment to offer the sincere thanks of the Scottish Liberal Democrats for the life and work of Sir Ming Campbell, who was lost to us last week. Ming was a titan of British politics. He commanded respect in the Parliament in which he served and in homes across this country. He was a mentor and friend to so many in my party, and we miss him. I offer condolences to his family at this difficult time. Presiding Officer, when companies generate renewable energy, they're expected to give money back to the local community. But the amount of cash we're talking about here is absolutely pitiful, because the rules haven't changed in more than a decade. All the while, people are still shivering in the shadow of turbines, unable to heat their homes. So will the Scottish Government listen to the Liberal Democrats, to Highland Council, to Shetland Council, and change those rules to cut energy bills for local people?
First Minister.
President, first of all, can I thank Mr Cole-Hamilton for his words, as I thank Mr Sarwar for his words on the situation in Gaza, and also associate myself with his remarks about Mingus Campbell, Lord Campbell of Pittenweem. I was warmly and fondly welcomed into the House of Commons by Ming Campbell in 1997 and enjoyed far too many uproariously funny conversations with Ming and his late wife Elspeth, who were always wonderful company. And I convey to the Liberal Democrats, as I have conveyed privately, my appreciation and my sympathy as they wrestle with the loss of a giant of the Liberal Democrat movement. In relation to the substantive question on renewable energy, I actually have a lot of sympathy with Mr Cole-Hamilton's point. The issue of community benefits arising out of wind farm developments is regulated by the United Kingdom Government, and we have been pressing for some time to mandate community benefits from mature onshore renewable technologies and to create greater benefit for communities, particularly in relation to the reduction of fuel bills. So I'm sympathetic to his point, but it's an issue that the Government continues to press the UK Government on, and we will continue to do so.
Alex Cole-Hamilton.
But you can't dodge this entirely. Some of this lies with his government too. Yesterday I was in North Edinburgh with Ed Davey and Councillor Sanna Dijkstra-Downey. We met at Edinburgh College apprentices who are being trained for good green jobs, installing home insulation, solar panels and heat pumps, technologies that are ready to go, and at the heart of Liberal Democrats' realistic plan to halve household energy bills by 2035. John Swinney's own independent advisers now say his government is extremely unlikely to meet its fuel poverty target. They found people catching hypothermia in their own homes, missing meals to top up the meter, burning their own floorboards for fuel. The Scottish Government's consultation on the amount energy companies give back closed 6 months ago, but nothing's changed. Under Liberal Democrat proposals, there are millions of pounds out there that could warm homes across Scotland. So when will the First Minister change those rules?
First Minister.
Well, the issues are essentially the existing arrangements which are specified by the United Kingdom Government are non-mandatory. So, as a consequence, there is a limit. It's actually one of the examples of the constitutional point that I make. I'm very sympathetic, but I can't exercise powers that legally I'm not entitled to exercise. That's actually one of the limitations of the constitutional arrangements. So I'm absolutely with Mr Cole-Hamilton in wanting to use the energy wealth of Scotland, which is absolutely beyond dispute. We all agree about that. I'm absolutely with him on the desire to eradicate fuel poverty. I spent some time in the island of Yell in Shetland earlier on in the summer, where I saw an excellent example of a community wind farm which is creating real benefit in the locality, owned by the community. So these models can be delivered where there is community ownership, and we have, and the Scottish Government enabled that development to be undertaken in the island of Yell. But I then went to the main island in Shetland and saw a colossal wind farm, the Viking Energy project, which is not delivering the right level of benefit to the community, nor is it eradicating fuel poverty, where people in Shetland are living cheek by jowl with one of the largest wind farms in Europe and paying the highest levels of fuel bill and also living in fuel poverty. So the powers to arrest that do not rest in this Parliament. They rest with the UK Government, and I'm determined and very keen to work with Mr Cole-Hamilton to get those powers here so that we can do something about it for the people of Shetland and the people of West Edinburgh.
Question number 4, Claire Adamson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what assessment the Scottish Government has made of any implications for its work to mitigate the two-child benefit cap of the UK Government's reported proposals to replace the cap with a tapered system.
First Minister.
President Officer, I have obviously seen the press speculation to which Ms Adamson refers. It's important that the UK Government lets us know as soon as possible about any plans they may have, because, as Ms Adamson will know, the Scottish Government is pressing ahead with our own measures to abolish the two-child limit, which should have been undertaken as one of the first acts of the Labour Government. And the Scottish Fiscal Commission estimates that 43,000 children in Scotland would benefit from the Scottish Government's two-child limit payment, and Scottish Government modelling shows that 20,000 children will be kept out of relative poverty as a result.
Claire Adamson.
I thank the First Minister for his answer. In hearing these murmurings, it was not surprising to find out that Labour is now backpedalling on these plans. With a record 4.5 million children living in poverty under the Labour Government, plans to introduce a tapered system is nowhere good enough. Can the First Minister join me in calling for the UK Government to reconsider this short-sighted proposal and instead follow the Scottish Government's lead, dump the cap and dump the so-called rape clause?
First Minister.
I very much associate myself with the comments that Claire Addison has made. The Scottish Government is taking measures which are resulting in a reduction in child poverty in Scotland, but all of the estimates that we see is as a consequence of the actions of the Labour Government, particularly in welfare reform, there is likely to be a rise in child poverty across the rest of the United Kingdom, and of course across the rest of the United Kingdom child poverty is rising. So I make the plea today, as I have made it on many other occasions, for the Labour Government to recognise the absolute imperative of eradicating child poverty, take the measures to lift the two-child cap, and then enable the Scottish Government to use the resources that we are doing to mitigate another Westminster decision that is bad for Scotland, to take other measures to eradicate child poverty in Scotland.
Question number 5, Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. To ask the First Minister what the Scottish Government's response is to reports that the mental health budget has been reduced in the 25-26 autumn budget revision.
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the budget remains as originally published at £270.5 million.
Brian Whittle.
Can I thank the First Minister for that answer? But the situation speaks to a wider problem across health and social care, namely that it is verging on impossible to follow the path from a Scottish Government spending commitment to the frontline support it is intended to provide. Audit Scotland and the Fraser Allender Institute have repeatedly warned that the complex and convoluted methods used by the Scottish Government are barriers to effective public scrutiny, and now we have organisations directly impacted by this funding seemingly unable to determine how or even if that money that was promised will reach them. Presiding Officer, as Scotland's Mental Health Partnership said themselves, transparency is essential. Now, the First Minister might be able to explain where these tens of millions of pounds of public money are when he has a briefing note in front of him, but how does he expect the public, the organisations who rely on it and those who scrutinise the Government to do the same?
First Minister.
Well, I think the transparency and the clarity was in my original answer. The budget remains as originally published at £270.5 million. And I say I understand the importance of this issue and the significance that Mr Whittle attaches to all of this. But I simply make the observation that it's interesting that Mr Whittle is interested in the budget of £270.5 million for mental health support, but he wasn't interested enough to vote for it when the budget came to Parliament. And it's all very well coming here complaining about budgets, but people have got to vote for them to be spent in the community in the first place.
Absolutely. Paul Sweeney.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Dr Pavan Shreddy, Vice-Chairman of the Royal College of Psychiatrists, has described the autism and ADHD waiting time scandal as a public health emergency. So will the Scottish Government fulfil its commitment to expend 10% of the NHS budget on mental health by the end of this Parliament, so that those trapped on the waiting lists will have some reassurance that they will get the support they need?
First Minister.
The Government is on track to fulfil that commitment.
Thank you. Question number 6, Michael Matheson.
To ask the First Minister, following Scotland's Global Investment Summit 2025, whether he will provide an update on the Scottish Government's work to attract international investment into Scotland's economy.
First Minister.
So Scotland is a nation which is extremely attractive to investors due to our skilled workforce, world-leading universities, a strong presence in skilled workforce in sectors like energy and a supportive business environment. That is why we have been ranked as the top destination for foreign direct investment outside of London and the South East for the last 10 consecutive years. This work is led by the Deputy First Minister, who has been actively engaged, as I have been, in the Global Investment Summit which took place in Edinburgh this week.
Michael Matheson.
Scotland's record has been consistently good in attracting direct foreign investment into Scotland. Last year alone, it attracted 135 projects and is ranked the 6th most attractive location in the top 10 locations in Europe for foreign direct investment. The First Minister, though, will recognise that critical to delivering a just transition, we need to make sure that we attract energy manufacturing capacity here to Scotland to support us in the building out of our renewables. Can I therefore ask the First Minister what specific action has been taken in order to ensure that we attract that type of investment to create the jobs we're looking to do here in the Scottish economy?
First Minister.
President, a number of steps have been taken, particularly in relation to the strengthening of the scoping and consenting arrangements for particularly offshore renewables projects, and the Government is now very focused on taking those decisions. We obviously work very closely with the United Kingdom Government and press the arguments, particularly with GB Energy, for there to be, and also with those responsible for the national grid, to ensure that there is connectivity for these projects so that the supply chain can have confidence in making its investment decisions. Now, of course, there are a number of developments that have taken their course, Sumitomo at Nig or the developments at Ardazir, which are very strong indications of good foundations for the supply chain. But we need every step of that journey to be undertaken to give us confidence in attracting investment, and the Scottish Government is focused on making sure that's the case.
Craig Hoy.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. In a week when John Swinney released yet another taxpayer-funded fantasy pamphlet on independence, the City of London Corporation stood shoulder to shoulder with Scotland to unlock new opportunities for growth. But two areas where this SNP government has effectively scuppered future inward investment are nuclear energy and oil and gas exploration, both of which are vital to our energy security and our economic security. So now freed from the shackles of the extremist Greens, why doesn't John Swinney do the right thing by the Scottish economy and commit to fully drilling the North Sea and ending his government's student union politics on nuclear energy in Scotland?
First Minister.
Well, we'll make our policy choices, and on the nuclear question, I've made a policy choice that I want to make sure that Scotland's natural and sustainable sources of energy are the ones that we should develop, because that's better for our people and our planet, and I'm very proud to defend that in this Parliament today. And then secondly, on the question of the oil and gas sector, I really think it is the shiniest of brass necks imaginable for Craig Hoy to indicate to me that there is an issue about, on the question of oil and gas activity, because the Conservative government that he supported presided over a punitive tax regime on the energy profits levy, which is recognised by every commentator to be the biggest impediment to the security of the North Sea oil and gas sector. And Mr Hoy should face up to the realities of the dreadful decisions that the last Conservative government made.
Thank you. We move to constituency and general supplementaries, and I call Emma Harper.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, the General Secretary of the RCN said health and care services would cease to function without migrant nursing staff. Does the First Minister agree with this statement, and will he outline what assessment his government has made of the impact of the Labour government's new immigration rules on vital essential workers in Scotland's NHS?
First Minister.
I think the General Secretary of the Royal College of Nursing has given a very silent warning to all of us about the welcome that has to be extended to staff from other countries to come and work in our National Health Service. In the year ending June 2025, the number of health and care worker visas issued to nursing professionals fell by 80%. 80%. Now, that is going to have a damaging effect on the operation of our National Health Service. We all know there are challenges about the size of our working age population, and we need to have an appropriate skilled worker visa route which works in the interests of the National Health Service, and that's one of the reasons why having control of these issues in Scotland will be better for the people of Scotland.
Absolutely. Alexander Stewart.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, a recent report has uncovered that NHS patients in my region and across Scotland were forced to receive electronic shock treatment against their will almost 1,100 times last year. And in around 2,000 cases out of 4,000, this outdated procedure was performed on people who, because of their mental state, were deemed incapable of giving consent. So what action can the Scottish Government put in place to ensure that vulnerable patients are protected from receiving this ethically unacceptable procedure?
First Minister.
President, I will take away, if Mr Stewart would like to write to me with the details, I'll explore that in more detail. His issue merits a deeper answer than I can offer him at this particular stage. My first reaction would be that such judgments have to be made on the basis of clinical opinion, but obviously he raises a wider and more significant question which I would rather have the opportunity to explore, and if he would care to write to me, I'll give him a substantive response.
Thank you. Martin Whitfield.
I'm very grateful, Presiding Officer. A report published yesterday, Improving Care Experience Delivering the Promise, by the Accounts Commission and Auditor General, concluded from the outset there was no assessment of what resources and skills were needed to deliver the promise by 2030, or how success would be defined or measured. First Minister, who should take responsibility for that failure?
First Minister.
As Mr Whitfield knows, I take responsibility for everything here. I'm the First Minister of Scotland. I don't dodge that for a moment. And we gave a commitment as a government to honour the promise. And in terms of the definition of success, I'm a wee bit mystified by that point in the Audit Scotland report. It's pretty clear what the promise has got to achieve by 2030, and we are making progress in that respect. I think I understand the interest of Mr Whitfield in this question, but there has been substantive progress made. For example, we have now we've taken action to ensure that no young people under 18 are admitted to young offenders institutes. We have fewer children in Scotland growing up in care since 2020, a reduction of 18.1%. Incidents of physical restraint and seclusion are declining in children's residential accommodation, and more people with care experience are going on to positive destinations 9 months after leaving school. Now, I acknowledge that there is more work to be done in this respect. The work has been taken forward very effectively by the Minister responsible, Natalie Dawn-Innes. She has my full support, and we of course have legislation that Parliament can scrutinise on this issue that will be dealt with by Parliament before the close of the parliamentary session.
Michelle Thompson.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The latest Scottish Chamber of Commerce quarterly economic indicator survey published this morning shows 7 out of 10 Scottish firms continue to struggle with higher employment costs and have concerns about further potential adverse policies arising from the UK Labour Government. Has the Scottish Government had the chance to assess the impact of these increased national insurance contributions for employers in Scotland, a tax on Scottish businesses? And if so, what are their findings?
First Minister.
President, this is a serious issue because it has reduced the competitiveness and opportunities for growth within the Scottish economy. The Government's analysis shows that the changes could cost employers in Scotland over £1.7 billion, and the cost to public services are of the order of over £500 million. Now, this indicates a significant burden that is being carried by business within Scotland and, as a consequence, is an inhibitor of growth. And it is beyond me why a government that apparently supports economic growth is taking such a measure. It's another example of why we should take decisions here in Scotland on our behalf, which will be in the interest of the Scottish people and the Scottish economy.
Tess White.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, NHS Grampian has plunged into further financial crisis, with the board's financial director saying it's struggling to stay afloat. And this morning, a diagnostic report from KPMG said that expenditure has risen by £153 million. That's a 33% increase. NHS Grampian has already the lowest bed base in Scotland. The Cabinet Secretary has failed to get a grip. The strain is intolerable for staff and patients. So please, First Minister, will you meet with the board, who this morning put out a Facebook post and said they have a path to improvement? I don't think so. Will you meet with them urgently to discuss their financial crisis in advance of the winter?
First Minister.
The Government has taken measures in relation to NHS Grampian, and the board is under a very significant level of additional scrutiny as a consequence of the issues that Tess White puts to me. Now, I know the Cabinet Secretary is meeting the board on Monday. I'll wait to get a readout of that report. I'm very happy to engage. I discussed the performance of the National Health Service on a weekly basis with my officials, so I will reflect on the points that Tess White has put to me, but I do assure her that the issues which are important for the delivery of healthcare to the communities in the North East of Scotland is being properly and effectively scrutinised and delivered, and I will ask the Health Secretary to write to her with an update on these issues.
Rhoda Grant.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. The First Minister will be aware that the only islander on the board of CMAL has not had his membership renewed. This is a snub to our island communities who are left yet again with no islander on the board. Can I ask the First Minister what he's going to do to increase the number of islanders on the board of CMAL and ensure that islanders are represented on boards that are crucial to their survival?
First Minister.
As Rhoda Grant will appreciate, the appointment of members to boards is undertaken by a process that's essentially overseen by the ethical standards advisors in this process, and those processes must take their course. However, her point is a substantial point about the necessity for island opinion and island experience to inform the decisions of bodies that are acting on issues that are significantly impacting on island communities. So regardless of board appointments, I would expect CMAL, Caledonian McBrain, Highlands Islands Enterprise, the Crown Estate Scotland, all of these different bodies that have got locus in relation to Nature Scot, all these other bodies have got locus in relation to the issues and experience of islanders, to go to the absolute lengths to make sure they can hear islander opinions, listen to them and address those issues, because they're legitimate issues that have to be taken seriously by all these boards. And although membership cannot perhaps in all circumstances reflect the legitimate aspiration that Rhoda Grant puts to me, boards must listen to islanders and act on their behalf, and I will ensure that's the case.
John Mason.
Thank you very much. We all support the right to protest, assemble and march and so on, and yet at the same time we have the Hate Crime Act, which makes it an offence to stir up hatred. And can the First Minister say that he thinks we have the right balance, or can we get the right balance? Because some groups, for example, Catholic and Irish people, feel threatened by the repeated orange marches in Glasgow, and Jewish people feel threatened by the repeated pro-Palestinian protests.
First Minister.
This is a very sensitive issue, and I have to be careful also here that we're in territory here where Police Scotland have got to make careful judgments about a whole variety of different circumstances, which have been long-standing in Scottish society. Some of these issues are more easy to handle than others. But fundamentally, I believe that we have to recognise the right to peaceful, respectful public assembly and freedom of expression. We all enjoy those rights and we're committed to upholding them. However, the right to peaceful assembly and expression should never be used to carry out or justify any form of hateful, violent, intimidating or otherwise criminal behaviour. And any form of hate crime is completely and utterly unacceptable, and the Act that Parliament passed in the Hate Crime and Public Order Act Scotland 2021 includes rigorous safeguards on free speech, and we respect everyone's right to this.
Orna Slater.
Just 2 weeks ago, our capital city, my hometown, Edinburgh, backed Scottish Green councillors' calls to ensure that no public money is being used to bankroll Israel's genocide. This comes more than a month since our Parliament voted to back our calls for boycott, divestment and sanctions against the genocidal Israeli regime. Will the First Minister tell me what additional legislative changes the Scottish Government will pursue to enable local authorities like Edinburgh to legally adopt the BDS policies this Parliament has agreed to support?
First Minister.
I set out to Parliament in my statement on the 3rd of September the actions that are within the competence and responsibility of the Scottish Parliament to take forward. The Government will pursue that agenda to make sure that we fulfil the commitments that I gave to Parliament.
Thank you. Keith Brown.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. This week, as we've heard, the Scottish Government published a fresh start with independence. At a time when many of my constituents are struggling to heat their homes and pay for their food shopping due to Westminster inaction, and bearing in mind the promise to reduce energy bills by £300 has turned into an increase of £200, can the First Minister outline his government's findings on the impact of independence on living standards and energy bills?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, the Government's paper that was published yesterday makes clear that there are opportunities that exist for Scotland to improve the living standards of people in Scotland by exercising the powers that come with independence. We were promised in 2014 lower bills, financial security and EU membership, and all of those promises have turned to dust. So this is the time for Scotland to have a fresh start with independence.
Megan Gallagher.
Families of residents at a sheltered housing complex in Falkirk are deeply concerned about plans to outsource care services to an external provider. The proposals, which would remove the round-the-clock care service at Tiggetshog Court, form part of an effort to address the £21 million budget shortfall. Families were not properly consulted, and local councillors have expressed their frustration at the lack of influence over decisions made by the IJB. First Minister, should decisions that directly impact local communities be made by councillors or a majority unelected IJB board?
First Minister.
Well, the arrangements for integrated joint boards have been put in place by statute, which have been considered by Parliament, and it's the responsibility of the integrated joint boards to take those decisions, and there will be members of any relevant local authorities on those boards. There should also, however, be appropriate and adequate consultation with people who are affected by service changes. That's an implicit part in all of the approaches that are taken about any service changes that take place, and I would encourage that to be the case in this circumstance.
Thank you. That concludes First Minister's questions. The next item of business is a member's business debate in the name of Claire Adamson, and there will now be a short suspension to allow those leaving the chamber and the public gallery to do so.